Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Two very telling races overnight. Let's start in Wisconsin, where liberal judge Janet Protasevich has now overturned and flipped control of the state's conservative Supreme Court. This is a big win for abortion rights and could mean that the court could overturn the state's abortion ban. They could also end the use of gerrymandered legislative maps, which have given Republicans commanding control of the state's legislature. Now, state Supreme Court races like this don't usually garner this kind of national attention, but this race is having a huge impact on the future of a very key battleground state. And Robin, it did become the most expensive judicial race in American history, with more than $40 million spent.
$40 million?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go back to Chicago for a moment. The race for mayor there, it was Democrat against Democrat. So what's the takeaway from last night, Mary?
The big takeaway is that this is a very big victory for progressives. Brandon Johnson, a union organizer, former teacher, is now set to become Chicago's next mayor. This was a close race, but Johnson had the backing of the teachers union. He was promising to invest in schools and social programs, and he was also vowing to address the root causes of crime in the city, where his opponent was promising to add additional police force.
Yes, this was really fascinating yesterday. Thank you, Wisconsin, for showing up, but not so much to the Milwaukee suburbs. The northern suburbs of Milwaukee, decided to put in another Republican in a special election in the state legislature in the state of Wisconsin, giving the state of Wisconsin Senate a supermajority by which they can now flex and impeach the woman you just voted to be the new Supreme Court justice. What a tangled web these conservatives weave. So you got the front attack, okay? You got the front, entryway right. You got that, assertive sort of a vote done yesterday. But I told you that, Wisconsin is a swing state. It is 50-50, right? It's 50% Democrat, 50% Republican. And the suburbs in northern Milwaukee are, very Republican, very red. And that is the District 8 in Wisconsin, that had to select in an open seat, a senator. And they chose the conservative freak. They remember that I was talking about yesterday, the guy Knoodle? You chose Knoodle. And Knoodle said, yes, I'm not interested in impeaching the governor, Tony Evers, because he's a Democrat, right? So therefore, Tony Evers is in their sights only because he's a Democratic governor. So he said, well, I'm not so interested in impeaching Tony Evers, but, Janet, maybe I would. Maybe I would impeach the new Supreme Court justice, and maybe I would impeach, the Attorney General, and maybe I would impeach the district attorney in Milwaukee, John Chisholm, and maybe I would impeach some other people I don't like. And, Brett said, well, don't they have to have a reason to impeach? Well, legitimately, yes. Technically, no. But they're saying soft on crime, soft on crime. So now the Wisconsin legislature has a supermajority, meaning enough to override any veto by the governor of any damn thing, including abortion, election maps, redistricting, everything, right? The manner in which you select your electors. Yes, the Senate has a supermajority, and they can override the veto of the governor with their new supermajority. I think there's 33 seats in Wisconsin Senate, and 22 of them now, or 23 of them now, are in the hands of Republicans. In the Assembly, in the House, in Wisconsin's legislature, you're 2 seats shy of having a supermajority there. And you would need a supermajority in both houses to override a veto of the governor. But congratulations, Wisconsin. You just took a perfectly, a battleground state, a perfectly divided swing state where everybody got a say, and you just, through these gerrymandered maps, handed a supermajority to the Republicans who can undo all the good that you did. So I don't want to, piss on your parade because, Dan Kelly was who Janet I can't say her name. I think it's Protasewicz. Janet Protasewicz is now, she has just tilted the Supreme Court. It was 4-3 conservative. Now it's 4-3, not conservative, whatever, moderate. But so she made her little acceptance speech yesterday, and she said, listen, Wisconsinites voted, and they had their voice heard, right?
Today's results mean two very important and special things. Yes. First, it means that Wisconsin voters have made their voices heard. Yes. Yes. They've chosen to reject partisan extremism in this state. And second, it means our democracy will always prevail. Too many have tried to overturn the will of the people. Today's results show that Wisconsinites believe in democracy and the democratic process.
Well, I mean, I understand why she's taking a victory lap. It was a hard-fought campaign. There's no doubt about it. And the person that she was running against had already, been a Supreme Court justice. I think he did his 10 years. And through those 10 years, people complained about him. They told people who were voting for a new seat, for a new justice, that this guy was a problem. And people sort of rejected him. But he wasn't having any of it. The guy's name is Dan Kelly. You don't have to remember his name because you probably never hear from him again. But here's Dan Kelly saying, I really wish my opponent was worthy of a concession, but she's not.
Now, this didn't turn out the way that we were looking for. And I think there are a couple of reasons for it, and I think we need to address them head on. And it brings me no joy to say this. I wish that in a circumstance like this, I would be able to concede to a worthy opponent.
Oh, my God.
But I do not have a worthy opponent to which I can concede. This was the most deeply deceitful, dishonorable, despicable campaign I have ever seen run for the courts. It was truly beneath contempt. Now, I say this not because we did not prevail.
Yeah, right.
I do not say this because of the rancid slanders that were launched against me.
Rancid.
Although that was bad enough. But that is not my concern. My concern is the damage done to the institution of the court. My opponent is a serial liar.
Oh, my God.
She's disregarded judicial ethics. She's demeaned the judiciary with her behavior. And this is the future that we have to look forward to in Wisconsin.
You dodged a bullet, Wisconsin.
I don't know, Randy. He seems like an even-keeled, classy kind of guy that should be on any court.
Keep it classy. Keep it classy,
Super
Kelly.
classy, dude.
He lost by 10 points. I mean, it wasn't even close, okay? It really wasn't. And now the Wisconsin Supreme Court is, 4-3 majority, not conservative. He was part of that conservative bloc. But listen, the Supreme Court in Wisconsin is going to have to decide whether a law from 1849 regarding a woman's right to privacy in her own person stands. You can bet that will not stand. The gerrymandered legislative maps, the election administration, meaning whether or not you actually will have elections in Wisconsin. Because, each state chooses the manner in which each state selects the slate of electors. Now, I'm telling you right now, you got a problem in your legislature, Wisconsin. You got a serious problem there. And I just know that you're going to have to pay a lot of attention to every single bill that comes out of the House and the Senate in Wisconsin. We all will. We all have to.
All things Randy at RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, The Randi Rhodes Show.
A
Within hours of becoming the first American president to become a criminal defendant, Donald Trump was on a flight back to Florida to deliver a defiant address.
I never thought anything like this could happen in America. Never thought it could happen.
Trump claiming the case is politically motivated and denying all wrongdoing.
This fake case was brought only to interfere with the upcoming 2024 election, and it should be dropped immediately.
But prosecutors say it's Trump that interfered in the 2016 election, alleging he repeatedly made hush money payments to hide personal scandals and falsified documents to cover it all up. The former president surrendered to authorities in New York hours earlier, stepping out of Trump Tower with a raised fist, waving as he stepped into his vehicle. Inside the courthouse, Trump was treated just like any other criminal defendant.
Not really.
Arrested, fingerprinted, and processed, but no mugshot or handcuffs.
Right.
President Trump, will you come speak to us? President Trump?
Trump remaining silent until he entered the courtroom, then pleading not guilty to all 34 felony charges. Still cameras only allowed inside for just a few minutes, capturing this image. The former president at the defense table, stone-faced with his hands in his lap. Prosecutors say Trump orchestrated a criminal scheme where he repeatedly and fraudulently falsified New York business records to conceal criminal conduct that hid damaging information from the voting public during the 2016 presidential election.
Catch and kill scheme. That is a scheme to buy and suppress negative information to help Mr. Trump's chance of winning the election.
The indictment alleges Trump worked with his former lawyer and fixer Michael Cohen and his friend, former National Enquirer publisher David Pecker, to direct hush money payments to at least 3 people. The most well-known case, the $130,000 paid by Cohen to porn actress Stormy Daniels in the campaign's final days. But prosecutors allege the National Enquirer also paid $150,000 to former Playboy model Karen McDougal. Both women say they had affairs with the former president. Trump says they did not. And prosecutors allege the Enquirer promised to act as the eyes and ears for the campaign, even paying off a Trump Tower doorman who was trying to sell a story about Trump fathering a child, which the tabloid later concluded was not true.
34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are. We cannot and will not normalize serious criminal conduct.
Okay, so, I've spent a little time looking at this entire last, 5-6 years of, Donald Trump wiggling out of every illegal thing that he ever did. And this indictment does not say, and this is the problem. And I said, look, if the indictment comes down, and the indictment tells a story about tax fraud, and the indictment tells a story about more than election, campaign violations, then let it rip, right? Let the chips fall where they may. Donald Trump has a chance to go to court. Donald Trump has the world's, most expensive lawyers. He's had hundreds of lawyers in his life. He's been sued hundreds of, if not thousands of times. He knows his way around the courtroom. He is not some sweet little country mouse. He isn't, somebody who is unfamiliar with what's needed to fight charges. Okay. But if this is only about hush money payments, if this is only about, funneling money through a law firm and Michael Cohen taking out a home loan, paying it to Stormy Daniels, and then trying to conceal that payment, well, then I don't know whose side Alvin Bragg is really on. But I will tell you this right now, okay? The reason why Michael Cohen was charged with the same crimes and went to jail, and the reason why Donald Trump was not charged with those crimes and didn't go to jail is twofold. One, at the time that Michael Cohen was prosecuted for the same crime, I mean, they were co-conspirators. Remember, Donald Trump in Michael Cohen's indictment was individual one. There was a conspiracy. Michael Cohen went to jail. He was adjudicated guilty. He pled guilty. And he was, sentenced to 3 years in a guilty plea, in a plea deal, 3 years. Then COVID happened, so he did 2 years in Otisville, and then he was released on his own recognizance. Does anybody remember? Not on his own recognizance. He was released to house arrest because of COVID, right? And so he was placed back in his apartment, but he was monitored. He couldn't leave, all these restrictions. Now, what's interesting is Michael Cohen wanted to write a book about everything that he had just been through. And the Trump administration, I want to call it an organization because that was not a presidency. You understand that was a racketeering, influence, corrupt organization that was posing as a presidential administration, but it wasn't. It was an organization, and it was corrupt. So when Michael Cohen said that he was going to write this book. Do you remember that Bill Barr told Michael Cohen that if he writes this book, he will go back to prison? And Michael Cohen said, I wrote the book. And they said, you're going back to prison. And they sent him back to Otisville. Does everybody remember that? I hope you do. Because that right there was the weaponization of the Department of Justice. They did that again. They did that again to John Bolton. Again, not a fan. But John Bolton wrote a book about his time in the Trump administration. And the Trump administration literally prohibited his book from being published at first. And Bolton had to fight the Trump organization. Yes, I'm calling it the Trump organization because it was not a presidential administration. It was a corrupt organization. They actually tried to stand in the way of John Bolton publishing his book. He just told you on a Sunday show last Sunday that that was the weaponization of the Department of Justice and that he could cite many other instances where the Department of Justice was weaponized.
So you agree that the Justice Department was weaponized under the Trump administration?
I can attest to it personally. I don't need to look at other stories.
What do you mean by that?
Well, when Trump and his lawyers in the White House and in the Justice Department brought both a civil and a criminal case against me for publishing a book that didn't go through the pre-publication review process when they know that it had been cleared in the regular order, that is abusing the Justice Department. And there are plenty of other examples besides.
Yeah, there are. And Michael Cohen is one of them, okay? He is one of the examples of the Department of Justice being weaponized against him. Now, what's really fascinating to me is that Michael Cohen pled guilty to the hush money payments, to tax fraud on the hush money payments, meaning he said that was income that he got from a retainer agreement with Donald Trump. There was no retainer agreement, but he pled guilty. And he also lied about, this is crazy, because hardly anybody knows this, but you'll know it now. Michael Cohen pled guilty to lying to DOJ about how many contacts Donald Trump actually did have with the Russian government in service of a Trump tower that Donald Trump wanted to build in Moscow. The real correct answer was 10. And Michael Cohen downplayed that on behalf of Donald Trump. That was another guilty plea that Michael Cohen entered.
To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
And this is where we are right now. I have a Trump-hating judge with a Trump-hating wife and family whose daughter worked for Kamala Harris and now receives money from the Biden-Harris campaign, and a lot of it.
So he literally went on TV last night and, put out like a nice family, be ashamed if something happened to it, kind of mob talk. And he did it across the board. He did it to the judge. He did it to the judge's wife. He did it to the judge's daughter. He did it to Letitia James, who has a civil suit against him for tax fraud after the Trump organization was charged and it was proven. And Weisselberg is sitting on Rikers Island in a plea deal, 17 counts of tax fraud from the Trump organization. So Donald Trump's bookkeeper is sitting on Rikers Island after being convicted of, and entering into a plea deal there, right? And he's screaming that Letitia James is a racist. Fani Willis in Georgia, she's a racist. That his phone call to Georgia was a perfect phone call. There's more than one phone call to Georgia. There was a phone call that we all know that got real famous real fast because it was dead to rights. Donald Trump trying to fix an election, because that's all Donald Trump knows how to do is fix things. He knows how to cheat. He knows how to defraud. He knows how to lie. He knows how to steal. That's Donald Trump's forte. And there are people in this country that admire that. They want a president who's going to lie, cheat, and steal. They really do. They think that makes him strong. It makes him anti-democratic. It makes him illiberal. And I mean like anti-democratic, not, that democracy doesn't work for him. Rule of law doesn't work for him. So, this is what he does. He stood there last night. He attacked Alvin Bragg, said that Alvin Bragg was a criminal. Alvin Bragg needs to go to jail.
Came out today, everybody said this is not really an indictment. There's nothing here. My lawyers came to me and they said, there's nothing here. They're not even saying what you did. The criminal is the district attorney because he illegally leaked massive amounts of grand jury information.
What?
For which he should be prosecuted, or at a minimum, he should resign. And Alvin Bragg's wife confirmed a report that claimed her husband has Trump nailed on felonies. She has since locked down her Twitter account.
Okay, so not just Alvin Bragg, but Alvin Bragg's wife, too, has to be denigrated, has to be mentioned as a problem, has to be mentioned as somebody who needs targeting, okay? Alvin Bragg's wife. The judge, Judge Marchand, not just Judge Marchand, but Judge Marchand's wife. Not just Judge Marchand's wife, but Judge Marchand's daughter, okay? They all have to be targeted. They all have to be somebody that has a bullseye, crosshairs drawn around them. Now, I don't know how long Donald Trump is going to last before the judge calls him back in and says to him, you either tone it down, buddy boy, and stop threatening people's families, including mine, or you're not going to await trial on your own. You're going to await trial on Rikers next to your bookkeeper there. I don't know how long. I will tell you that the next time that Donald Trump so far is ordered to court is December the 4th. December the 4th. That is the next time you will hear anything about this, okay? And so that means that the trial, if they can't delay it even longer, if they can't make spurious motions, if they can't, claim this or that, or somehow gum up the works, that the trial of Donald Trump for felonies, 34 felonies, not misdemeanors of, jerking around with the business records, not just lying on your ledgers, but that he entered into a conspiracy, okay, a conspiracy to affect the results of an election, okay, with Pecker and with, Michael Cohen, and, that he was doing this and violating tax laws. And we know that Bragg doesn't need to prove that he cheated on his taxes because it's already been proven that he cheated on his taxes. It's already proven that his organization, for which he is the CEO, was found guilty 17 different times for tax fraud. Now, Bragg doesn't need to go retry that case. He just needs to show the result of that case to prove that Donald Trump's intent was to defraud the American people, that we didn't have a right to know what Donald Trump's character was. And Donald Trump decided that he didn't want us to know that he paid off porn stars, that he paid off a mistress. He didn't want us to know that he entered into a conspiracy with David Pecker at the National Enquirer. After the Access Hollywood tape came out, he didn't know whether he was going to win or lose the election based on our judgment of him on the Access Hollywood tape. It turned out that Republicans didn't hold it against him, that he was saying out loud that he could molest women. They kind of thought it was a plus. But you have to remember, Donald Trump didn't pay Stormy Daniels. He didn't actually send the payments to her until after he won the election, because he wasn't sure if he would. And if he didn't, he wasn't going to pay her, because who the hell would care what you thought of him? So that's interesting. But, listen, I got to tell you that people are sitting there and they're saying this indictment, the the statement of facts, which is not the indictment, the statement of facts, the story that it told was a really disgusting, dark, dank story of a man with absolutely no morals, no character, no conscience, nothing, okay? And that he was going to, listen, the idea that he could have written her a check and given it to her and said, sign this NDA and that will be the end of it, that was totally something he could have done, but he didn't. He didn't. He had to funnel it through Michael Cohen, and there's tape of him saying to Michael Cohen, wash my hands, make my hands clean. I mean, it's sick. And Michael Cohen, he said, so what do you want, cash? And Michael said, no. We're going to talk to our friend David, who we now know as David Pecker at AMI, and we're going to get him to pay off one, and then I'm going to take care of the other one. And he said, well, go talk to Alan and find out how we do it. Instead of just writing her a check, right? So we don't have to prove anything more than what's in the indictment. What we have to show is intent to commit these felonies, and you already have that. Now, this is just the very first case, and I'm telling you right now, is this the crime of the century? No, it's not the crime of the century. It's a character crime, is what it is. It's a felony, but it's a crime that shows you the character of this man. He doesn't have any. He didn't want you to know who he was. He didn't want you to know what he was doing. He didn't want you to know. He wasn't afraid of what turned out to be MAGA. He was afraid of moderates. He was afraid of losing independence. He was afraid that, women would, think that he had a pattern and practice of paying women off after he had used them or abused them. And that was the truth. That's what he did do.
Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
When I read this, I feel he did tell us.
What did he tell us?
He told us that the participants violated election laws and that they mischaracterized these payments for tax purposes. And that tells us everything we need to know about what the crimes are, what the criminal intent was, because Alvin Bragg doesn't have to prove which crime at the end of the day. The crime doesn't even have to be committed or started or just intended, and that meaning they meant to commit a crime or conceal a crime. And so I feel like he told us everything we needed to know in this statement of facts.
Can I jump in? Because I think the crux of it, I was saying to Poppy earlier, I said, I believe they are telling us, especially on page 7, where he talks about the $420,000 to Michael Cohen. It seems that they were upping the amount that they were paying him so that he could report it as income.
Exactly.
And then that would be a violation of the tax code. Whether or not he did it, he reported it, the intent was there for them to, it was fraudulent. Am I correct in that?
Absolutely correct.
Okay.
And an analogy that I think is easy to understand is in the context of a burglary. A burglary is a trespass, which is a misdemeanor, right? You enter and remain unlawfully somewhere.
Right.
But what makes it a felony, is if you intended to commit a crime therein. And so somebody can walk into your apartment and get stopped and arrested right there before they committed a crime. A prosecutor has to prove that they went in there to commit a crime. You don't know which one it is.
Right.
It could have been a sexual assault. It could have been a violent crime. It could have been to take something. And you'll look at the surrounding evidence. Did he have, burglar's tools, or did he have a knife? You look at the surrounding evidence and you make an argument to the jury, and the jury just has to say, oh, yes, there was criminal intent there. He wasn't going in to sleep, right? So that's what bumps it from a misdemeanor to a felony.
That's true, and that's why there are underlying crimes that Donald Trump was engaged in that Alvin Bragg doesn't even have to prove because it's already been proven. The Trump Organization has already been convicted of 17 counts of tax fraud, right? Michael Cohen has already pled guilty to this scheme, being a part of the conspiracy to make this scheme real. Michael Cohen's already admitted that he wrote the checks, that he took a home loan in order to pay her, that Donald Trump wanted her paid, and he wanted her paid on the sly, that he didn't want the payment to be released until after the election, because if he'd lost the election, he wasn't going to pay her at all. So even in his cheating, he was cheating her, depending on the results of the election. I mean, what a disgusting person. Now, the reason why Michael Cohen went to jail and Donald Trump didn't, like I said, is twofold. Number one, you had a presumption by virtue of an opinion that was issued by the Office of Legal Counsel inside of the Department of Justice all those many years ago, which still, reigns supreme in the minds of prosecutors, and that is that a sitting president can't be indicted. Okay. So Michael Cohen could be indicted, and Donald Trump wanted Michael Cohen indicted because he felt that the exposure that Michael Cohen, that the media was getting hip to what happened here, that Michael Cohen needed to be punished, that his fixer didn't fix it good enough, and Michael Cohen needed to be punished. Now, what's interesting is that at the time Michael Cohen pled guilty to charges that were brought to his doorstep by the Department of Justice, Jeff Sessions was the Attorney General of the United States. Jeff Sessions was. And Michael Cohen was, entered into a plea deal because, he understood that he was facing lots of time in jail because of, doing this in service of campaign fraud, in service of the tax code, meaning you were going to claim this as a retainer and income when it wasn't. All of this could have landed Michael Cohen in jail for like 10, 20 years. So he entered into a plea arrangement, right? And he pled guilty to a whole bunch of crap. He pled guilty to the tax fraud. Now we understand what the tax fraud was. It was that he was going to claim this $420,000 as, retainer money when it was clearly a reimbursement of a payoff to a porn star in service of an election, to rig an election in Donald Trump's favor. And so there was tax crime there. Well, anyway, what's really important to know is that because Donald Trump was president, he couldn't be indicted, but he was individual one in what became the information, what became, the Michael Cohen case, and that there was a conspiracy between Michael Cohen and individual one to defraud the people of the United States, right? So all of a sudden, Michael Cohen is in jail. Okay, Michael Cohen's getting ready. He actually reported to jail already. And we get a new attorney general all of a sudden. Now all of a sudden we have this new AG who auditions for the job by writing an op-ed that catches, the eyes of Donald Trump saying, you need a better fixer than Jeff Sessions, basically. Okay, you need somebody who can really weaponize the DOJ on your behalf. Your fixer just went to jail, and you need a new fixer, and I'm a presidential fixer. I fixed things for, other presidents before. I was attorney general before, and I can fix things for you. And suddenly Bill Barr becomes the attorney general of the United States. And what's the first thing? The first thing Bill Barr wants done when he becomes the new AG? I mean, it's like February, okay, of 2019 when Bill Barr finally becomes, the AG again for the second time. And one of the first things that he wants to do is get the conviction for Michael Cohen reversed. Why does he want to do that? Because he likes Michael Cohen or because Trump likes Michael Cohen now? No, he wants to do that because he wants to fix it so that there is no crime. There is no crime. And therefore, when Trump isn't president anymore, Trump can't be indicted for a crime because the crime never happened. And that's the very first thing that Bill Barr wanted to do, was overturn the conviction of Michael Cohen, and not because he wanted to do Michael Cohen any favors. In fact, when Michael Cohen wrote a book about it, this so incensed Bill Barr's plan that Bill Barr actually said to Michael Cohen, you write this book, you go back to jail. And Michael Cohen was like, I have a First Amendment right. No, not anymore. Not in this United States. Not when I'm Attorney General. Not when he's the president. You write that book, you're going back to jail. And they sent him back to jail. That's what Bill Barr wanted to do. And the reason why Bill Barr wanted to do it was because he knew that there would come a day when Donald Trump wasn't president anymore, and that Donald Trump was individual one. We all knew that. Everybody knew that. And that Donald Trump would be prosecuted for this conspiracy if he didn't get rid of the conspiracy itself. And that's true. That really happened. That really, really happened. So Bill Barr became Donald Trump's fixer. And not only did Bill Barr weaponize the Department of Justice against any enemies of Donald Trump, okay, and protect Donald Trump instead of being the Attorney General of the United States of America and enforcing our laws or making sure that criminals get prosecuted, which is what you do at the Department of Justice, but instead he became Donald Trump's fixer. The other thing that you need to remember that Bill Barr did, you remember Michael Flynn? Michael Flynn pled guilty, not once, but twice. Why did Michael Flynn plead guilty, and what did Michael Flynn plead guilty to? Well, Michael Flynn was picked up on a wiretap. Yeah, he was recorded. And he was back-channeling to Russia Ambassador Sergei Kislyak a promise that if Russia continued to troll and insert itself into the election, if Russia continued to, put these ads on Facebook and pay for them in rubles like they were doing, if Russia continued the troll farm out at St. Petersburg with Prigozhin, who's now the Wagner mercenary dude, right? If all this went well and Donald Trump won with the help of Russia, then Michael Flynn was promising Sergei Kislyak that the sanctions that were put on Russia as a result of Russia annexing Crimea under the Obama administration. Obama put sanctions on Russia because they didn't want to go. I mean, nobody wanted to go to war with Russia. Obama didn't. We didn't. Nobody does. To this minute, nobody does. So we sanctioned Russia for their annexation of Crimea. Michael Flynn, who we saw on TV at the dinner with Putin, who was intercepted on a wiretap with Sergei Kislyak, was promising Putin that the sanctions would be taken off Russia if Donald Trump won. And when the FBI confronted Michael Flynn with this wiretap, Michael Flynn lied to the FBI. That's what Michael Flynn pled guilty to. In 2017, 2 times he lied to the FBI, and he pled guilty twice to both lies that he got caught in, making false statements to the FBI. Bill Barr did something.
Mary had a little man. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
We're going to go to the Department of Justice now, and that stunning headline. The president's former National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, his charges against him have been dropped by the Justice Department. He pleaded guilty twice for lying to the FBI about his conversations with Russia's ambassador. Our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas is tracking the story. Good morning, Pierre.
George, good morning. In what some are calling an extraordinary move, the Justice Department essentially blew up the first major prosecution by Special Counsel Bob Mueller. And the department appears to be saying that the FBI should never have interviewed Michael Flynn in the first place.
29 months after leaving this courthouse in shame, following pleading guilty to lying to the FBI, the Justice Department that convicted Michael Flynn now seeking to throw out the case. In a highly unusual and perhaps unprecedented move that shocked some law enforcement officials, the department seeking to throw out a conviction where the defendant had admitted to his crimes twice in open court. Flynn's guilty plea centered around lying about his contact to then Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak. He was fired for misleading the vice president about his communication with the ambassador, and when confronted by the FBI, lied again.
I fired him because of what he said to Mike Pence. Very simple.
No career prosecutor signed on to the motion to dismiss. including the special counsel prosecutor who had worked the case. But Attorney General Barr's hand-picked acting U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia concluding that Flynn's prosecution was unjustified and that the lie he told the FBI was, quote, not material because the Bureau had decided to close an investigation into whether Flynn had been compromised by the Russians before they conducted the interview. Now, the president who forced Flynn out is calling him a hero.
He was an innocent man. He is a great gentleman.
And the president directed more fire at the FBI for a Russia investigation that he believes should never have been started.
They're dishonest, crooked people. They're scum, and I say it a lot. They're scum. They're human scum.
Critics complaining overnight that Barr is simply doing the bidding of the president in trying to systematically undermine the Russia investigation. This morning, House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler calling for an Inspector General investigation.
And that Inspector General investigation did occur. It did happen. And here is what the Department of Justice Inspector General found. Now, the reason why Bill Barr was saying we have to get rid of the Flynn conviction, we have to get rid of it, is because the Flynn conviction would also expose Donald Trump to the obstruction of the Mueller investigation after the president wasn't president anymore. And so Bill Barr was, called in to fix all of this stuff that Jeff Sessions was doing. Jeff Sessions was literally prosecuting people for lying to the FBI, a la Michael Flynn, who was caught on a wiretap, promising the Russian ambassador that should you support Donald Trump and continue to support him to right into the White House, Donald Trump will take the sanctions off of Russia. Donald Trump will do that for you. So that's why you have to continue to support him. And when he was asked about it during Crossfire Hurricane, Flynn lied to the FBI. And the FBI had him on a wiretap. The FBI had him on video. We saw it. He was sitting there in Russia with Vladimir Putin at Vladimir Putin's dinner table. Okay? We all saw the evidence. Well, Jeff Sessions saw it too and decided that he was going to prosecute Flynn. Flynn lied to the FBI, and that became the crime. Okay? And so Flynn was asked to enter into a plea deal or not. He said he wanted to. He entered into a plea deal for lying to the FBI 2 times about 2 different things during Crossfire Hurricane. Okay, the same thing with Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen was prosecuted for funneling and laundering money payoffs to Stormy Daniels and to Karen McDougal. One using a home loan and then getting reimbursed through the Trump Organization, which was a way to launder the payments, right? And the other was David Pecker doing it at AMI, at the media company that owned the Inquirer. Well, David Pecker entered into a non-prosecution agreement with the Department of Justice, right? He was ready to just, sing like a canary, but he first wanted protection. He wanted a non-prosecution agreement, which he got. When all this started to, make itself known to Donald Trump that this could come back and bite him in the ass on the day that he's not president anymore, Donald Trump decided 2 things. One, he would always be president, always, because if he wasn't, there was a chance that he would be prosecuted. And 2, these cases could be disposed of with the right kind of fixer. And those cases, once they were disposed of, didn't exist and therefore could never come and bite him in the ass. So Donald Trump actually was turned on by Bill Barr's, his romance when he wrote this, op-ed in the paper telling him, I got this. I know just how to do this. I know just how to fix this for you. But Sessions ain't the guy. He's screwing you, and you don't even know it. He doesn't even know it. It's not that he's a bad guy. It's that he's stupid. And you need to get rid of him, and you need to get hold of me, and I will fix everything. Because Crossfire Hurricane, if you say that the premise upon which Crossfire Hurricane was started, the predicate for all these charges, wasn't real or was bogus, then the charges all can be washed away too, and there's no exposure for you once you're not president anymore. And Donald Trump liked the sound of that, and so he actually fired Jeff Sessions and hired Bill Barr. So now let's, remember that we've already had the Inspector General's investigation into whether or not Michael Flynn, whether the investigation into Flynn's lying was justified, whether Michael Cohen was just. So on Crossfire Hurricane, whether that was opened legitimately, The Inspector General found, quote, I'm reading from the IG report, we concluded that the quantum of information articulated by the FBI to open the individual investigations of Papadopoulos, Page, Flynn, and Manafort in August of 2016 was sufficient to satisfy the threshold established by the department and the FBI. Okay? So they totally screwed Bill Barr in their finding. Bill Barr's entire MO was going to be to say that the Mueller investigation was predicated on something that didn't need to happen. That the Mueller investigation, that Crossfire Hurricane, that the whole investigation was garbage. And garbage in, garbage out. So the IG, after he interfered to get Michael Flynn off, which he did, everybody was like freaked out. What do you mean? He pled guilty, but he pled guilty twice. Not just once, but twice. Now, all these years later, a new AG is going to come in and he's going to say that he shouldn't have even been asked these questions about why he was caught on a wiretap talking to Kislyak, telling Kislyak, giving him guarantees on behalf of the Trump campaign that should Trump become president, sanctions will come off of Russia. That was an illegitimate question that the FBI asked him about. And that was Bill Barr's game. That was all Bill Barr's doing, okay? And it's really disgusting. It's really, amazing. But once he disposed of the Flynn, he felt emboldened, Barr did. And he said, you know what? We also need to get Michael Cohen's case thrown out, even though he's already in jail. We need to get that case thrown out. Know why? Because that case will come back and bite you in the ass on the day that you're not president anymore. That case is still a live case because in that case, there's a conspiracy that's been alleged. And Michael Cohen pled guilty to it. So it's a live conspiracy case with one of the conspirators already pleading guilty. You are the other conspirator. That will come the day that you're not president. And you will be charged with that. We need to do something about that. And what I'm suggesting you do is we drop the Cohen case, that we actually vacate the Cohen case. We say it didn't happen, it didn't exist. Michael Cohen was wrongly convicted, just like Flynn. And that way it goes away. And when you're not president, nothing can happen to you. And Bill Barr went about trying to do that too. And how did he do that? He called SDNY in New York that was investigating it.
It on TV.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
The Southern District of New York, at the same time as ourselves at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, we're looking at the so-called hush money payment issue. And then we learned from the Southern District of New York that they asked us to stand down. And by stand down, I mean they were communicating that they had this ongoing investigation and they wished that we put our efforts on hold while they completed their investigation. And obviously that was a discretionary call by me whether or not to do that, but I felt it was entirely appropriate. Obviously the Southern District of New York is it's an excellent organization with great leaders and prosecutors, and I felt that was appropriate for me to press the pause button.
Okay, so that was the former district attorney of Manhattan, Cyrus Vance. And Cyrus Vance is no longer the district attorney of the borough of Manhattan. Now Alvin Bragg is. So here's what's important to know as we, discuss what that stand down thing is about. Okay, so SDNY is it's the Southern District of New York office of the DOJ. It's federal. It's the Department of Justice. Okay. And your ultimate boss when you work in the Southern District of New York, even though Southern District of New York prides itself on being very independent from D.C., from Washington, Southern District of New York's ultimate boss is the Attorney General of the United States. At that point, it was Bill Barr. And Bill Barr wanted to kill the local investigation into the Michael Cohen hush money payments and the local investigation into the Trump Organization and tax fraud and the local investigation that was a civil case that was going on. And so the Department of Justice under Bill Barr called the elected borough district attorney, Cyrus Vance, and said, we need you to step back. We need you to stand down. We need you to quit your investigation into Michael Cohen and the hush money payments. You know why? You know why? You're stepping on the Department of Justice. And the Department of Justice has this very large investigation going on. And we're going to look into all of these matters. And so you need to pause your investigation while we do ours. And Cyrus Vance decided that the Department of Justice and SDNY was, a very professional office. They had always had, this reputation for being independent of the Department of Justice, even though they are the Department of Justice. And so he would defer and he would shut down his investigation into Michael Cohen. Now, Cyrus Vance has a reputation for doing that with the Trump family before, and it didn't look good to New Yorkers. New Yorkers weren't having any of it because Cyrus Vance was looking at Ivanka Trump, okay, and also Junior for some time before Donald Trump was president for fraud that went into the sale of the Trump property in the Village in Manhattan, Trump Soho. And he was, he was talked into or decided that he wasn't going to go ahead and prosecute them for some fraud that he had found happened with the sale of apartments in Trump Soho in that building. So Cyrus Vance had a bad reputation with regard to prosecuting the Trumps prior. Well, Cyrus Vance is no longer the district attorney, as we all know, and Alvin Bragg is. And the district attorney in Manhattan represents the borough of Manhattan, and the state of New York is his boss, okay? Not the feds. It's a state thing. And so Alvin Bragg, after Cyrus Vance was told to stand down and said he agreed to do that, Alvin Bragg comes in and Alvin Bragg goes, I don't agree to do that. I'm doing an investigation. Know why? Because the Trump Organization was just convicted on 17 felony counts, okay? 17 guilty convictions for Donald Trump's companies. Something real is going on. Something prosecutable is going on. This is a fraudulent company that, laundered money for this hush money payment. And Donald Trump did it to, hide the payment. Michael Cohen went to jail for this crime. Donald Trump's not the president anymore. Bill Barr is not the AG. DOJ isn't, the SDNY doesn't answer to Bill Barr anymore. I'm going to do it. I'm doing it. And he did it. And he did it. Now, Bill Barr has subsequently admitted to, inserting himself into the Roger Stone case, into the Michael Flynn case, into the Michael Cohen case. And what he was trying to do was make those crimes go away, even for the people who pled guilty to them, so that the crimes didn't exist when Donald Trump was no longer president. I hope that was a good explanation for you about what's going on here, because that is what's going on here. And what's really frightening and gross is that Donald Trump stands on the stage and accuses Merrick Garland's Department of Justice, accuses Alvin Bragg's district attorney's office in the state of New York in the borough of Manhattan of doing exactly what Donald Trump's Department of Justice and what Cyrus Vance in Manhattan actually did in service of Donald Trump. It's not even projection anymore, because projection says that whatever I'm doing, I'm going to accuse you of. It's already happened. They've done it. And now they're accusing the current occupants of these offices of doing what they'd already done. Bill Barr was a fixer. After Michael Cohen was, pled guilty, Donald Trump needed a fixer, but he needed a presidential level fixer, somebody who understood government, which Donald Trump did not, somebody who understood what the Department of Justice could do, where it could assert itself, where it could, just get rid of charges, where it could say, and how do you get rid of charges? Well, you say that the predicate the underlying theory of the case, was unjust to begin with. And this is what Bill Barr did with Crossfire Hurricane. This is what he did. This is why QAnon and freaks of nature out there think the Russia investigation was a hoax, because Bill Barr wanted you to. And that's why Bill Barr got out ahead of the Mueller report 3 weeks before he allowed you to see the redacted Mueller report, 3 weeks before, and told you, nothing to see here, move along. This droid means nothing to you. And literally use the force on you to try and blank out your mind from the fact that Flynn did plead guilty, from the fact that Manafort was in jail. In fact, Bill Barr got Manafort released from jail. Does anybody remember that?
Your reaction to the release of Paul Manafort from prison?
Well, it's highly suspicious. It seems to be another step in the politicization of the Justice Department, where the president's friends, people the president supports, are treated one way and everybody else is treated the other way. Just another example, like the outrageous decision to drop the prosecution of Michael Flynn after he stood up in court and swore under oath that he was in fact guilty.
So now everybody can see what has been going on at the Department of Justice in the Trump administration with the former Attorney General Bill Barr showing up and volunteering to be the new Michael Cohen, to be the new fixer. And in order to fix all of this crime, all of this, accountability, he had to say none of it happened.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. Reaction to the release of Paul Manafort from prison?
Well, it's highly suspicious. It seems to be another step in the politicization of the Justice Department, where the president's friends, people the president supports, are treated one way and everybody else is treated the other way. Just another example, like the outrageous decision to drop the prosecution of Michael Flynn after he stood up in court and swore under oath that he was in fact guilty. This is unprecedented, and we have a real problem with the Justice Department being subverted and politicized to be the personal agent of the president instead of the Department of Justice of the United States.
We reported the history of Bill Barr and this committee you run. Are there any plans to have Mr. Barr come back in to address all of this?
Well, yes. He had agreed to come in and testify before the committee on March 31st, as you pointed out, and that was put off. We've been in communication with them. And now that the District of Columbia has extended the stay-at-home order till June 8th, we are saying that we expect to see Barr in front of our committee on June 9th, the very next day.
So Bill Barr actually did go in and, he was like, yeah, whatever, it's, I interfere, Flynn, the predicate for the case, started talking legalese, basically saying the predicate for the case, that Michael Flynn pled guilty to was, erroneous. And so fruit of the poison tree, meaning if you opened up a case into Michael Flynn based on Crossfire Hurricane, which I'm telling you was a hoax. It was illegitimate, okay, even though Mueller found, he indicted 37 people, and Donald Trump was guilty of obstruction of justice 10 different times, but he was president, so he couldn't be prosecuted. So Bill Barr understood what his job was, and his job was to say that the predicate for the entire Crossfire Hurricane investigation and anything that came from it, including Michael Flynn's confession of guilt, that it was all fruit of the poison tree, that it all had to be wiped away. All of it. Manafort, Flynn, everybody could, free pass because the predicate was wrong. There was no reason to open Crossfire Hurricane. And finally, in the end, we had the IG's report, and the IG at the Department of Justice said, No, that was a legitimate, predicate. That was a legitimate case that actually legitimately interfered in the 2016 election. The Russians had a troll farm. You indicted, because we don't have extradition with Russia. There will never be a trial of the people indicted as being the interferers in the Russian portion of the Russian interference into the 2016 election. And it's only because we don't have extradition. But they were charged, they were indicted for their part in it. That really did happen. Michael Flynn really did go sit and have dinner with Putin. Michael Flynn really did plead guilty after he was confronted with intercepts, with wires, with wiretapped intercepts. This is why Bill Barr goes, I really do think spying did occur. Because he's saying they had absolutely no business opening up Crossfire Hurricane in the first place. So whatever they found that Michael Flynn was doing and promising the Russians in exchange for their support can't be used. That's what fixers do. And that's what Bill Barr's job was. And that's what Bill Barr did. And you know why he did it? Do you? It's real simple. Bill Barr did it because he's an Opus Dei Catholic. Bill Barr did it so that he could be the Attorney General of the United States in the exact moment that 3 super uber Catholic, right-wing Catholics could be put on the Supreme Court with Donald Trump nominating them. That's why he did it. He did it to get the Supreme Court. Remember, in the end, Bill Barr is a lawyer, a big one, a huge one. And his love is the law. And he realizes that if Satan ever came back, he would come back as a lawyer. And if somebody wanted to ban abortion, if somebody wanted to take away the right to vote, if somebody wanted to gerrymander, if somebody wanted to do, they would need the Supreme Court to do it legally. And so Bill Barr went about making illegal things legal by saying whatever illegality happened during the investigation called Crossfire Hurricane, during the investigation of Robert Mueller, whatever you got as a result of that investigation doesn't exist anymore because the investigation shouldn't have existed. And I'm telling you that, and that's what you're going to believe. Even though the Inspector General in the end said, oh no, it was a legitimate investigation. It needed to happen. And that is what happened. That is what occurred here. Okay? And everybody was being asked, what turns a guy like Flynn? Like everybody knew what happened. What turns a guy like Flynn? And Barry McCaffrey actually laid it out for you, the part that everybody played. Bill Barr's part has never really been exposed. I think I'm the only person that will tell you that it is my opinion that Bill Barr did all this to get the Supreme Court, okay? I really, in my deepest heart of hearts, believe that that's why Bill Barr showed up, that's why Bill Barr volunteered himself to be Trump's fixer, is because the dark money, the Donors Trust people, the Kerry Severinos, the Leonard Leos, okay, they all needed Bill Barr to be in there at that moment when they could seize the Supreme Court. They needed Bill Barr, a guy like Bill Barr. And Bill Barr figured, this is how I do it. This is how I get in there. I become the Attorney General. And the reason I will be picked is because I will promise Donald Trump that I could get rid of all the convictions, Flynn's, Manafort's, Cohen's, everybody who pled guilty. I can get rid of all of it for him so that there are no conspiracies existing once he leaves office, if he ever leaves office or whatever. And that's why Bill Barr was not opposed to Donald Trump losing the election, because he already got what he came for, right? And that's why at the end he said, well, I'm not going to help him fix the election. I mean, I have no reason to, but he had every reason to fix these investigations at the time for Donald Trump so he could be there and make sure Donald Trump picked the guys on the people on the list that the Federalist Society wanted picked for the Supreme Court. So that's why he did it. Why did Michael Flynn do it? Why did Michael Flynn turn? Why did Michael Flynn become a Russian agent? Well, that's easy.
It was alarming to see him enjoying a banquet dinner with Putin on the Russia television coverage of that event early on. But what turns a man like Mike Flynn?
I don't know. I saw him in Afghanistan, and he was an important part of the McChrystal effort to stop terrorism from coming back to American shores. So he's a very capable intelligence officer. He got the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and he failed there. And he essentially got fired by the Pentagon and by President Obama. Then he started to go off the deep end. So, I mean, all the way through the campaign where he's chanting, "Lock her up," this is not the language we expect
from the director of intelligence. So that's what happened to Flynn. Flynn got fired. Flynn failed at his job at DIA. He failed. He was fired. And he was full of revenge.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Jeffrey Berman was the U.S. attorney in SDNY, the federal prosecutor's office in Manhattan, while all this was happening. And Jeffrey Berman technically was recused from directly overseeing this case. The hush money case, because he had been part of the Trump campaign before he was appointed U.S. attorney. Right. And he thought that might have seemed like a conflict of interest, given that the case involved fraud allegations about campaign expenditures. So he was technically recused from overseeing the case, but he was in charge of the U.S. attorney's office when this case went to court. And in his book, in this book, Holding the Line, that Jeffrey Berman published about his time as U.S. attorney in SDNY, he explains in detail that Maine justice under Trump reached into SDNY and intervened with the prosecutor's office in Manhattan to protect Trump in this case.
Yep.
He says it explicitly. This is from page 24 of Jeff Berman's book. Quote, the first time Maine justice intervened, even though I was not overseeing the Cohen case, I still had to deal with other issues involving it, all of them deriving from the same source, Maine justice and its attempts at interference. The first time Maine justice interfered was when the information was being finalized. Information is a term of art in this context. After Michael Cohen agreed to plead guilty, the charging instrument against him became an information rather than indictment. So that was the title of the document that Berman is referencing here. It was an information. It was about 40 pages long, he says. And it, quote, referenced a person identified as Individual One as having acted in concert with Michael Cohen. Right. He says, quote, there was zero doubt as to the identity of Individual One. It was Donald J. Trump. Berman says, quote, consistent with DOJ guidelines, we first submitted the information to the Public Integrity Section at Maine Justice. They signed off. We then sent a copy to the Deputy Attorney General at the time, Rod Rosenstein, informing him that Cohen's guilty plea was imminent. The next day, the prosecutor in my office, who was overseeing the case, received a call from Rosenstein's principal deputy. He was aggressive. Why the length, he wanted to know. He argued that now that Cohen is pleading guilty, we don't need all this description of the crime. The prosecutor responded, what exactly are you concerned about? Rosenstein's deputy proceeded to identify specific allegations that he wanted removed from the information. Almost all of them were items referencing Individual One, Donald J. Trump.
Yes. And that was all coming from Bill Barr. That was all to wipe away any conspiracy that involved Donald Trump that Michael Cohen pled guilty to, because there would come a day when Donald Trump would not be president. And on that day, Donald Trump would be prosecuted for his role in a conspiracy to launder money through the Trump Organization to pay back Michael Cohen, who then commits tax fraud. And Donald Trump commits tax fraud because he says that this is income, that this is regular income owed to Michael Cohen, but it isn't. It's a hush money payment being paid back to Michael Cohen on the sly and putting it in the ledger as income. Michael Cohen then says, well, if I'm going to claim this payback as income, you need to double it because I'm in the 50% tax bracket. Oh, and I want a $50,000 bonus on top of it. And so the number is going to be $420,000. And Bill Barr calls SDNY, the federal prosecutor in New York, and tells them this is how the indictment must read. All references to individual one must be removed. And Jeffrey Cohen, who is in charge of SDNY at this time, is recused himself from the Michael Cohen case. Why? Because Jeffrey Cohen worked on the Trump campaign. He's not some Democrat. Jeffrey Berman is a Trumper. Jeffrey Berman worked to get Trump elected. He just thought that he was getting, a Jeff Sessions, not a Bill Barr. And when Bill Barr came down the pike, he told Berman, you need to get rid of the conspiracy. What's with the speaking indictment? The man is pleading guilty. We don't need your indictment to speak. We don't need it to tell the story of a conspiracy. You hear me? Get rid of individual one. And does it happen?
The revised document, now 21 pages. Remember, it had started as 40 pages.
Correct.
Now 21 pages, kept all of the charges to which Cohen was pleading guilty, but removed certain allegations, including allegations that individual one acted in concert with and coordinated with Cohen on the illegal campaign contributions.
You know how long ago that was? But now it all makes sense. Now you can see what the fixer Bill Barr was doing. And it wasn't until this moment that I realized it was Bill Barr all along. Yes, Jeff Sessions was out. You're out, Tom. You're out. I need a wartime consigliere. And Bill Barr came in. And it wasn't until this moment that I realized it was Barr all along. And now I hope you understand what is going on in the world around Donald Trump. Now I hope you understand what a criminal it is. And you know what's really upsetting? The most upsetting point of all of this is that this man, this corrupt and fraud and fixing man, this mob boss, this guy, clean my hands, was president of the United States. That's devastating. That is just devastating. That could happen in this country, and that it did. And that we had a criminal in charge of the Department of Justice, that we had a criminal in charge of all of our government. All of it. It's devastating. Everybody suspected that there was something wrong with him. Everybody suspected he was less than above board. People understood that he had no character. He had no morals, that he did say things about grabbing women, and you could do it when you're a star. And he did have this narcissism, and he was, he was just not a person of the highest moral turpitude. He wasn't a person of good character. People understood that about him. But do you realize that this country was so strong, that this country was so worthy, that it survived 4 years of a mafia boss being in charge of all of it, and that there were people inside who refused? Because when the Department of Justice comes knocking at the prosecutor's door and tells that prosecutor, quit prosecuting, quit looking, quit asking questions, quit the investigation, just stop it. It's not good. It's not good for our purposes. But our purpose is supposed to be enforcing the law. Our purpose is supposed to be a nation of laws, not men. That's our purpose. No, it isn't anymore. The purpose of this country has completely changed. And if you don't like it, you have two choices. Either you do what I say or you resign, because that is all that a prosecutor can do in response to orders from on high to do bad things. That's it. That's all that you can do. And people did resign along the way. People tendered their resignations and said, "I'm not going along with this. This is anti-American. This is anti-democratic. This is something other than, a president, trying to achieve a worthy goal for the American people. This is a president manipulating the levers of power in order that he is never found guilty of crimes he's already committed and continues to commit while he's president of the United States, hence 2 impeachments." And we haven't even got to the special counsel now. We haven't even touched on Jack Smith's investigation into espionage and using our intelligence documents as fundraising vehicles, if that's what he was using them for. And I suspect it was, because all he ever cared about, all he still cares about is money and power. Period. End of story. Right? So we haven't even touched on that, and we haven't even touched on, Jack Smith's investigation into the insurrection against the United States of America that was directed by Donald Trump and his minions. We haven't even gotten there. We haven't even looked at how many people in Congress currently were part of this conspiracy. We're coordinating this conspiracy. We're affecting this conspiracy and, efforting this conspiracy and moving it forward. We haven't even cleaned our house yet. We're just now getting to the explanation for how did we end up here? This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. How did I get here? Yeah.
You may ask yourself.
And that's why he needed a wartime consigliere, because it was life during wartime. Save this one. Save this one, because the day will come when the trial occurs, and you will know what's going on.